Thanks for the introduction, David. My name is Max, this is Weijia, and together we present our work on access control in the home IoT. For decades, the home IoT has been promised to be just around the corner. In 1989, the movie Back to the Future, I hope you are all familiar with that one, portrayed a smart home that involved a smart oven and video calling in the living room. But in the last couple of years, this has come from vision to consumer reality. Now, with Amazon Echo, Philips Hue lights, Nest thermostats, lots of homes actually have some IoT device. In 2018, 1/3 of US households already had some home IoT device in their living room. As we learned today from the keynote, James Mickens therefore considers 1/3 of US households to be uninteresting. While the devices proliferate, there are a couple of key differences between the home IoT and traditional devices, that is, your smartphone and PC. These devices suggest a new approach to access control. But let's first have a look at single-user systems. They have well-developed access control mechanisms, but the home IoT is a little bit different. There, lots of people share many devices. Who visits your home interacts with them. And the multi-user environment is not homogeneous or monolithic. In fact, you have different generations of your family in your home. You have temporary visitors, sometimes even strangers in your home. Or let's put it this way. While you might invite your neighbor into your home, you usually do not invite them into your iPhone, right? When it comes to access control systems in current home IoT devices, vendors still treat it the old way. What is meant by that? Their access control is similar to systems developed 20 years ago. Usually you have a binary decision between full access and no access. At best, we have a guest access option. But current home IoT access control mechanisms do not enable users to capture complex social relationships that are present in the household and the home. Furthermore, the modes of interaction are changing. Usually, home IoT devices do not have screens or keyboards. Instead, people use their phones as proxy for identity and authentication. Or they don't even try at all. In the TV show South Park, they used Amazon Echo to fill viewers' shopping carts with inappropriate items. Right, this is hilarious and very funny and harmless, so to speak. One could imagine more serious cases of abuse. This raises the question, does the way we specify access control policies for the home IoT need to be rethought? When we talk about home IoT devices, we mean smart devices that are internet connected in your home. They offer certain capabilities. For example, you can ask your voice assistant, play me music, or order me a puppy. While those two examples have very different security implications, current access control policies grant access per device and not per capability. This leads us to our research goals. We wanted to conduct an empirical user study to map out the desired access control policies for the home IoT. We wanted to know how the access control policies vary by relationship and capability, and potentially identify default policies to be used in such systems. Next, I will explain our user study in a little bit more detail. In the study, every participant saw one capability of one device, and participants reported their desired access control policy for 6 different relationships in random order. I give you an example. Imagine you are the owner of a smart voice assistant. Using this device, some users can access the following feature. Make online purchases on a shared household account. When should your spouse be able to use this feature? Always, sometimes, or never. If the vast majority of participants gave the same answer, this suggested a likely default policy. However, it's not always that easy. Sometimes, as you can see in this example, it's probably fine that a child watches TV in the evening, but it's probably not okay at night. Thus, we also asked our participants when should it be allowed and when should it be not allowed. This way, we extended our research goals by asking users for contextual factors that influence their decision. In our user study, We considered 6 different relationships. For this, we created a list of 24 relationships and narrowed it down in a pre-study. We chose those 6 relationships, as you can see on the right, as they span the full range of desired access. For example, your spouse should usually have full access and your neighbor probably won't have a lot of access options. Furthermore, we tested 22 capabilities in our main study. Unfortunately, we did not include the IoT potato camera we learned today from James Mickens. However, we created a list of popular devices and their capabilities following standard consumer recommendations. And then we selected 22 capabilities based on our pre-study, asking for positive and negative consequences for such capabilities. The final list included, for example, order something online, answer the doorbell, or write a rule for your lawnmower. Now Weijia will report some of our main findings.
For our user study, we recruited 425 participants from Amazon Mechanical Turk. Our sample was nearly gender balanced. The median age range is between 25 and 34. Less than 20% of our participants held a degree or job in computer science or related field. Notably, 44% of our participants have used at least one home IoT device before. Voice assistants are the most commonly used. Internet-connected security cameras, thermostats, and lights were also popular. Let's begin with the first question you asked in this study. Given one particular capability, what access control policy should be set up for what relationship? In the following slides, you are going to see many figures like this. On the top is the relationship. On the left is the capability. The bar itself shows the distribution of our participants' responses. The green part stands for always, which means this fraction of participants reported that a teenager should always have access to play music. Similarly, the yellow part stands for sometimes, and the red part stands for never. If we put 2 rows together, you can see the differences in desired access control policies between 2 different capabilities. Here is an example. The first row represents policies about a teenager using a voice assistant to play music. The second row represents policies about using a voice assistant to ordering online. While both of these are capabilities of a voice assistant, participants' desired access control policies are very different for a teenager. We find the same looking across the columns representing our other relationships. These relationships including children, visiting family members, and babysitters. We observe similar differences for other devices as well. Given full access to an internet-connected log, you could answer doorbell or delete logs on the log. Comparing these capabilities, you can see the participants' responses differed. Even for a spouse, the most trusted relationship, around 25% of our participants selected never for deleting logs. As some participants wrote, a log is a log. Nobody should be able to delete it. You might already notice that there's a blank in child column. In our study, some capabilities, like answering doorbell here, requires a smartphone. We, perhaps optimistically, assume that an 8-year-old child doesn't have one. If we focus on one column, we can see how responses change across capabilities for one particular relationship. For the spouse here, you can see that the whole column is almost completely green. This means a spouse should have access to almost everything by default. On the other hand, the neighbor column is almost completely red. This means your neighbor, by default, should have no access except for special cases. However, for the other 4 relationships we tested, you can see a mix of different colors, meaning participants' opinion differed sharply. Across capabilities, teenagers are given the most access among these 4 relationships, and elementary school-age children the least. This piques our interest. Both teens and children are under their parents' guardianship, yet have very different access control policies. Even for a very sensitive capability like ordering online here, our participants report that it's much more acceptable to give partial access to a teenager. One participant said, At 16, they will be able to pick their own things to buy, but the final purchase should be ultimately my choice and meet my authorization. But when it comes to a child, they simply said they are in no way responsible enough at this age. From these results, we know relationships matter. However, current home IoT access control systems do not provide the flexibility to express policies based on relationships. For these 4 relationships in the middle, you can see a lot of yellow. As you may recall, this means a lot of participants selected sometimes as their desired policy. But what does sometimes mean? You cannot directly program sometimes into a system. How can we capture sometimes accurately? We found that many desired policies were based on contextual factors. However, current home IoT platforms mostly do not support them. In the coming slides, I will highlight some of the key contextual factors participants express in their desired policies. Afterwards, I will speculate on how systems could support these factors. I will start with contextual factors that are most straightforward to reason about. The time of day was an important factor in participants' authorization decisions. At night, it is probably not a good idea to let your family use a lawnmower, unless you enjoy arguing with your neighbors. As we have discussed, people don't trust their young child. However, some do hope their child can enjoy these futuristic features of home IoT. Therefore, some participants said that children should be allowed to use certain capabilities whenever I am home with them. That is, their authorization decision depended on who else was around. The location of the user themselves can also be crucial. Imagine you have a visitor and they are shopping in downtown. It won't be so fun if they suddenly decide that your house needs some rock music and remotely turn it on at max volume. As our participant expressed, it just doesn't make sense to let someone use it when they are not close. In addition to the location of users, the location of the device also mattered, especially for cameras. For capabilities related to camera, participants were very concerned about where the camera was placed. As one participant expressed, if it's used in the bedroom, then it would matter who has access. There are many situations where participants wanted to give someone one-time access upon request. That is, someone could request temporary access and only be permitted to use that capability when explicitly authorized by the owner. Other contextual factors are less straightforward to implement. For example, some participants' authorization decisions depended on potential consequences. Participants did not want to authorize actions that could lead to major consequences. The consequences could be a high monetary cost, impact on safety, or potential privacy violations. Participants also based authorization decisions on how the person was using that capability. In an example of usage that is not responsible, some children might prank their siblings by turning lights on and off continuously. Leveraging recent usage data, one might want an access control policy that says your child can only control the lights when they haven't used it for too many times recently. Relatedly, other participants' policies intended to grant access only when a user understood how to use the capability. This is especially common for children. Some participants also said that they would consider giving access to others if they were going to help them. For example, if a visiting family member would like to help mow the lawn, they would be more than happy to give them access to the lawnmower. So far, we've discussed how participants' desired access control policy varied by relationships and capabilities. We also identified how contextual factors are necessary for fully capturing authorization decisions. Unfortunately, currently deployed home IoT devices have very little support for expressing access control policies based on these dimensions. So what can we do? To narrow these gaps, we will spend the last few minutes speculating on potential design implications of our results. Currently deployed interfaces, at best, differentiate between owners and guests. However, we found a much more nuanced view of relationships is necessary to capture access control policies. To do so in a scalable and usable way, we imagine a possible interface that when you add a new user to the system, you could specify your relationship with the new user. The interface then presents a default access control policy based on that relationship. For example, if you select young child here, this system will take you to review the default policy set for this new user. In the default setting page, will see a list of devices that you have, and then when you click on Voice Assistant, for example, you will see a proposed policy of what capabilities young children in general should have access to, with the opportunity to edit. Current deployed interfaces for the home IoT generally allow for either full access or temporary access to a device. There's usually nothing in between. At best, a few current smart lock interfaces allow for temporary access by a particular user during a specified time window. However, we found that many other contextual factors played an important role in participants' desired access control policies. We imagine interfaces that allow users to specify access control policies based on much richer contextual factors. For example, in this mockup, one could specify that a child can only have access when the parent is around. Enforcement of this factor could be based on indoor localization, facial recognition, voice recognition, or other authentication techniques. Other contextual factors are focused not on users, but on device. As we have discussed, policies for cameras differ based on where the camera is located. Therefore, when a camera is added to the system, users should be able to say if it's an indoor camera or an outdoor camera. A location-appropriate access control policy would follow automatically. Further, if you select indoor camera, we imagine you could further specify which room your camera is placed in. A camera in the living room is very different from a camera in a bedroom. With a design like this, we provide a much richer vocabulary for users to specify access control policy for the home IoT. So to sum up, we discovered that desired access control policies differed based on the capability within a single device, as well as across relationships. Furthermore, many important policies authorize access only in a certain complex context. Unfortunately, these policies are difficult and in many cases impossible to express using currently deployed interfaces. We propose interfaces that can leverage who the user is to propose sensible default policies, as well as to express context-based access control policies. Thanks for listening, and we are happy to answer questions.
Thanks for the great talk. We'll take some questions.
Hi. Thought it was a really interesting talk. I had two questions that are related to each other. I was wondering for the respondents, I believe you mentioned that the average age was between 18 to 44, and that you polled men and women. I was wondering if there are any significant differences in responses about access control between genders and across ages. Maybe it's the case that people who were older or they were younger gave different notions of privacy between, like, for example, placement of cameras and access for cameras. Just wondering if you had any notion of that in your data.
Well, yes, we didn't really run a test between gender and the different age groups, but we do run a test between people who have children and who don't have children, and we didn't see any significant differences between these two groups. So our guess is that people's desired access policy are not really that different between different groups.
Hi, I'm Marshini Chetty from Princeton University. Thanks, it was a great talk. I was wondering with your implications, I really liked how you want to give users a more sort of nuanced control system, but have you thought about balancing people's need for a more nuanced control system with the convenience and ease of having a simpler control system?
Yes, that's a very great question. We have considered that's kind of the reason why we propose default policies based on different relationships, so people don't have to specify every access control policy themselves. And yeah, also we also consider about other situations that may be based on the consequences of different capabilities, different authentication methods, access control policy can apply to these kind of situations. So people don't have to set up everything by themselves.
Great, thanks.
Hi, this is Curtis from Virginia Tech. Very nice talk. I was wondering how many people in the 425 participants have real experience with IoT device in their daily life, and how many of them living in a smart home? I was quite curious about the how representative for the users to imagine the use cases and scenarios about the IoT devices, stuff like that.
Thank you for your question. Yes, so in the previous slide we have talked about there are about 44% of participants have used at least one smart devices before, and most of them are using like voice assistants. So yeah, in some sense they don't really have a very complete smart home in their house. But the point here is we want to capture what people really want from a smart home, what's their vision for this smart home, and what can we do to provide such vision to them.
Steve Bellevin, Columbia University. There's been a lot of work on just how hard it is for anybody to get access controls correct. And you're proposing very complex, nuanced mechanisms for many different kinds of devices. Is there any prayer that people are actually going to get this right?
Yeah.
Or how do you propose to do it? I mean, it's a very hard problem that, any context that I've seen.
Yeah, that's a very great question. So in this study, because everything is very imaginary, so we couldn't really know how people would use these access control policy in reality. But for the next step, we want to do a field study that we're really going to implement these access control policy in their smart home and see how people are going to react to these kind of things, and then maybe do more improvement or find some more interesting things. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay.
Hi, thanks for the great talk. Berkay Selik from Penn State. So kind of related to previous question, but have you ever thought about the policy conflicts?
Sorry, what?
The policy conflicts? The conflicts, negotiations?
Oh, yeah, I mean, you mean the conflicts between different users in the same room?
Yes.
Yeah, we didn't really put a lot of thought in this kind of things, like in this particular study, but we do think a lot about that, like after that, because you can see there's a lot of people do have expressed concerns about their conflict in usage will occur in the home. So yeah, that's kind of a very good question. We are probably going to do a more study on this kind of stuff and see how people are going to negotiate between each other to really set things up. Yeah, that's a very good suggestion. Thank you.
So in the interest of time, we'll take one more question, and then I'll ask the remaining people who want to ask questions to find the speakers during the break.
Okay, thanks, David. One very quick question. So, do you think your work has implications beyond the policy design? For instance, how your access rights are actually being represented and enforced in the system, because you're mentioning all the time capabilities, but I think all the systems are based on access control lists. Do you think so we actually have to design those enforcement technology from ground up as well?
Yeah, thank you for your question. We have considered about that problem, so that's why we propose a maybe future field study to really implement everything like in the real house and see if this factor really matters. Like people think it's a very important factor, like maybe who is around my children, these kind of things. Then maybe how we can identify these contextual factors will be very important for us to develop.
Okay, so let's thank all of our speakers.